Book Review Fridays are back. I'm really excited, and I originally wanted to do this because Yulia had asked me on Instagram if I could bring back Book Review Fridays. I'm not sure, I don't even remember why I stopped them in the first place, but now that I kind of have two channels going on, I feel like putting Book Review Fridays in my CraftyGirl vlogs makes more sense because I already have so much content going on over in Cheap CraftyGirl. I've always wanted to be part of a book club, but I worry that the type of books I read aren't sophisticated enough, so I don't know if there would be like people my age wanting to discuss basically like fantasy or like young adult, and I'm not ashamed of that at all because the authors are women my age, like Stephanie Meyers in Twilight. But I would love to join a book club. And those are the kinds of books I love. So I have my Book Review Fridays on a playlist. So if you want to like catch up and you're interested in seeing like what I talk about, I'll link that playlist down below for you. I am going to talk about this series in a whole, and first I'm going to just give an overview, but then in the second half of this video I'm going to deep dive. So if you haven't read these books, then in the second half of the video you may want to exit out in case you don't want me to spoil the books for you. So the first three essentially is one series about one couple, and then this series is an extension of the first couple, if that makes any sense. I'll get into that later, but essentially they're about two separate relationships. And it's by the author Kiera Cass. And essentially this is it's like a royalty version of The Bachelor and Bachelorette. Pretty much. There it is in a nutshell. I'm not sure how I would describe it. I would say that I think what Kiera Cass did was she took her version of what she thought the future of our world would be. So I think she does use like our maps, if you will, because she talks to like the Carolinas and Angeles instead of Los Angeles. So I think she is just writing for what she thinks will like her fantasy version of it would be. She has described it as, you know, there's a kingdom, there's a monarchy now, but the people of, I suppose, the United States, we have regressed into like a caste system, meaning people are in categories from like 1 to 6, and 6 is very, very poor and 1 is very, very rich. So, and each category, depending on what you do for a living, you're in that category. So like if you are a teacher or a music teacher, you're like in a case system 4, and 4 struggles. 4, they don't really have money, and sometimes they go without food, and sometimes they go without heat. That's basically it in a nutshell. 5 is very, very poor, and 6, you're destitute, and it's the worst situation of them all. And the storyline is about a prince, and this is something that they've done throughout the history of the new land, if you will, that the royal family will choose X amount of girls from each caste system, and then those girls come to the castle and the prince dates them all and figures out, you know, he lets them go one by one, kind of just like The Bachelor, and then eventually he picks his princess, and then they become king and queen. So Bachelor, right? That's just the same thing as The Bachelor. So the main characters in this first series is Prince Maxon. He has a very mature but kind-hearted, gentle soul type of personality that she has written him, but he comes off a little bit rigid on the outside. And then the other main character is America. Her name is America, and She is this girl, essentially. The way that Kira has described her, she has like red hair, she's pale, she's different. She has described America to still be like this beauty that's unexpected, and I love that. I love when the way the author describes the girl to be like super beautiful, but what you wouldn't expect. Not your typical run of the mill. So, what would be a series without a good love triangle, right? Like Edward and Jacob, and that's the same situation here. So she is just living her normal life as a 4, and she thinks she's in love with this boy who is a 5, and hence the triangle. And she, obviously, this is no like surprise because the whole series is about this, but she gets selected as one of the girls, and actually this is the first book, the selection. So she gets selected, and each girl that gets selected, regardless of what caste system they're in, they get paid. They will, like, I think they'll always be a princess. Even if Prince Maxon doesn't choose her, she gets like this princess title. And so the longer that she stays in the castle, the more money she gets. I think, which is very similar to Dancing with the Stars. I think the contestants get paid the longer that they stay on. I don't know if that's true or not. I heard that somewhere. But so even though America like detests Prince Maxon, she's determined to try to stick it out so that her family gets this money because they really, really need it. And she ends up telling Prince Maxon straight up front. She's like, and this is my take. She's like, yo, this ain't gonna work out for me. But we kind of need food, so can I just stick it out? And Prince Maxon instantly falls in love with that. Falls in love with the fact that she's not needy, not fake, and that creates basically the whole series. And he treats her extremely special, even though at first in this whole series, she tells him, she says, I will exchange, for me staying on, I'll help you figure out who you should pick. Like, I'll get to know the girls and I'll tell you who's not real and who is real. But of course, throughout this whole book, she is slow to find out something, but he's known from the beginning. And overall of the series, so the first one is the selection, the second one is the elite, and then the one, which is kind of pretty obvious, right? This is the first book of all the girls. There's about 30 or 35. Then this kind of comes down to the elite girls. There's like 5 left. And then this comes down to the last 2 girls. Oh, I got chills already. They're multiplying. So we'll deep dive into these series and I'll talk about it in case you've already read it and you want to know my opinion of these. Let's get into the overview of this series, and then that way if you haven't read these, I won't give too much away, and then you can decide if you want to read it or not. My personal recommendation, I'm going to go ahead and give it to you up front, 100% great books to read, especially if you love The Bachelor and Bachelorette. So the next 2 books in this series, or an extension of it, is called The Crown and the Heir. And I believe it goes in this order. So it's The Heir and then The Crown. And this is essentially, how do I talk about it without spoiling the first one? I kind of can't, can I? If you've decided to stay and you're still here, it's because maybe you've read it or maybe you haven't and you want to know everything about these books. So let's go ahead and get started in this series. So if you've read it, then you know that who Maxon chooses. I mean, duh, right? I mean, I'm kind of annoyed that he even kept what's-her-face as long as he did. To be honest, what's her name again? Chris. Ugh. And the reason why I was so off-put by that is because Maxon knew from the very beginning that he was smitten with America. And in this book, right, she spends the whole time deluding herself into thinking, I love, what's his face? I'm not doing a very good job of this, am I? Because I've already, Aspen. Aspen's the triangle guy, so it's Maxon, America, and Aspen. And she deludes herself into thinking that she still loves Aspen, that she's only in the castle to send her parents money, and that she's just going to help the prince find his princess. But the reality is, she figures out that she's in love with Maxon. But the other twist is, right, as most of you know, that Maxon's father, the king, is what has been written as not a very good king at all, in my opinion, which is gonna bring me to the point of this series. And I'm thinking I'm gonna have to split this video into two because I'm looking at the timer now and I've been talking for quite some time. So personally, I did not like the king at all. The way that the author wrote him, he's just a very detestable person, and he loathes America. He does not like her because America is the kind of character where she's wants the very best for everybody. She kind of really reminds me a lot of Katniss Everdeen. Although I feel like America's a little bit more selfish and than Katniss, but not overly. Anyway, in this whole book, it's really all about the caste system and what it does to people and how she doesn't support it, but the king is very determined to keep it in place, and the people are very unhappy, at least the people in the lower side, because the people who are ones and twos aren't bothered by it because their life is set just fine. And she wants Maxon to get rid of the caste system and dissolve it. The one that like had me just like this was when she had the girls had to do that televised event thing where they had to sit like kind of on a throne and they would bring in criminals, and these girls would have to basically charge the criminals with their crime and sentence them to life in prison. And the king purposely, to see what America would do and to what he thought would put America in her place, he brought out a criminal that stole clothes for his children because they didn't have any. And his sentence was life. And America was like, oh my God, no. And the king is like forcing back smiles and laughter because he knows that that crime didn't deserve that punishment. And America had a specific line, which was, okay, well, you committed this crime, so go serve your crime. That was it. She wasn't allowed to do anything else. But it was televised to show that if she was selected by the prince, that she could do the royalty job. So what she did instead was she took off her expensive jewelry and she gave it to the criminal, who isn't a criminal in my opinion, and said, here, go pay your debt to the king. And she ends up putting the spotlight on the king, who then knew he was put in a corner and he couldn't decline it. So here comes the criminal, gets on his knees, gives him the jewelry that came from her, that essentially came from him, if you think about it, because it was the jewelry from the castle, which makes it even funnier if you think about it. And he's like, I'm here to pay my debt off. And he releases the guy because he didn't have a choice. And let me tell you, he was not happy. And which again, this series kind of bothered me. In my opinion, I think that the author made the wrong decision in the personality of this girl. And if you've read this, then you probably know what I'm talking about, but I think I do want to save this for a different book review Friday. This is going to sound crappy, but I wasn't sad about how this ended for him, you know? And so this book is The Elite, and it comes down to the 6 girls. And she's still struggling here between Aspen and Maxon. And it only makes it harder when she knows that Maxon is off dating other girls. But what she doesn't know is the reason why he wasn't seeing her all the time was because he had already decided that she was the one. And the reason why he was spending time with the other girls was so he could, one by one, send them home. But she never knew that. She thought, oh, he doesn't know if he's interested in me yet. And so it was like this miscommunication between them two. And I love, even though I hate what happened to Marley, I love how it ends here between Marley and America. Like, I love it. And I'm not going to keep it a secret, obviously, because I'm talking about the entire series. But the king obviously dies. Unfortunately, the queen dies as well. And Marley becomes her, like, maid of honor. And she becomes her, like, lady in waiting. So the queen always has, like, her ladies. And Marley's, like, the lady in waiting, I guess. And America becomes a queen. She does. Prince Maxon chooses her. And he almost doesn't. Which I was like, no, don't do this to me, girl. Don't do this to me. I don't like it when books don't end in the way you want them to. I get that sometimes it's a little too predictable, but I'm comfortable with predictable. Like Divergent, how that ended, I'm not okay with that. And I think it's a stellar series, to be honest. I think it's really interesting. It's a teen take on The Bachelor, and I love the dresses. I love, like, how extravagant they are. And that was the other thing. Turn this into a movie series, which I hope they do. I cannot wait to see the clothes because it was a big deal. If you came to the castle and you were one of the selection, you got to choose what you wore and they had it made. And so I'm really interested. And especially in this one too, because the girl in here was really into fashion. I hope that you guys have found this to be, like, interesting and intriguing, and I always wonder if I do book reviews right. If I don't want to, like, leave big blanks, and I hope that I've talked about this to, like, your satisfaction. So I guess what I'll do now is I'll kind of talk to the characters in case you're wondering, like, how I felt about them. But like I said, the king, nope. The queen, yes. Prince Maxon, I was smitten by him. Smitten from the beginning. I loved his personality. I was not into Aspen, but I think that was because I was coming off of Hunger Games and I knew Gale was shady from the get-go because let's face it, we know I'm Team Peeta, and how do you even compare to Peeta? So I kind of, in my mind, I compared Aspen to Gale and Maxon to Peeta. So that was my own personal, path for which boy that I thought was best suited for America. So I was very excited because I honestly thought that the author, when I first picked up this series, I thought, oh, she's going to end up with the boy back home, blah. And then when she was like, no, she's going to get with the prince, I'm like, okay, girl. Because I think that in a lot of books I read, the author doesn't normally give you what you would expect. I think because now writing books or movies, people always try to go for that shock value, and you don't have to go for the shock value to have a good book. I am really saddened by what happened in the end to, what's her name? Celeste. Man, the way she wrote Celeste is one of the selection girls, and actually who was also one of the elite. But she wrote Celeste, who's like a 1. So she was already super rich. She was super famous. She was like very Hollywood, and she just came in with this "he's mine" attitude. And so you don't like Celeste, and then the way that it ends, you're just like, damn. Then all of a sudden you like the girl, and she gets a bullet to her head, and you're like, why? Just when Celeste and America are gonna be really good friends, the author takes her from you. Yeah, super sad. I didn't like Chris at all when I found out that Chris was part of that whole like revolution thing. I mean, it wasn't bad, but I just didn't like Chris. I didn't. I felt like she was trying to force herself and the prince to liking each other, and because she was very adamant that she thought she had something with him, but really the whole time he had something for America. So she was just a distraction, and I didn't appreciate it. When she comes home and he has the picture of the house for the family, and then it's still kind of turned bad, and she takes the bullet, or he takes the bullet for her, and you're like, what? I know I just went to the deep end, but honestly, I could probably sit here and talk for an hour, and honestly, I'm already at 30 minutes. Anyway, I highly recommend these, and the fall is obviously the perfect time to read and be cozy, and it's really fun, and I love books like these because for me, I want to, how do I explain this? When I pick up a book and read a certain type of book, it's because I want to escape reality for a hot minute, you know, like how tired I am from the chores, or mentally exhausted from work, and I just want to go somewhere else in a place where I feel like is exciting and fun, and where I could even imagine it's me for a minute. So that's why I choose to read books like these, because if I were to read sad books or autobiographies, which can be typically sad, not all of them, I just don't elect for that personally. So if you think I don't have a sophisticated palate for books, to each his own, but that is the reason why I choose these types of books, because I enjoy the world that these authors paint for us. I'll reserve this review for the next Friday, since I've obviously read them, so I'll make sure that you guys get another book review next Friday. And give this video a thumbs up. I hope you enjoyed spending this time with me. I do want it to feel like you guys are just spending time with me and relaxing, and this isn't a really get to the point kind of video. It's just friends hanging out. And please use the comments down below to talk about this book and to talk about how you feel about the characters and what you love the most, and then any series that you think are similar to this, because I've been out of the book game for a couple of months, so I don't know what's out. So leave me your suggestions for what's similar to this, and I will see you guys next Friday.